I've invited you all here today to share a little bit more about why I'm in the process of developing a lived experience arts company. So It Takes a Company, when it's ready to launch, is a program that will take people with a lived experience of mental health challenges, people with disability, people that have had experiences of marginalisation that have created barriers to pursuing an arts career, and will support them with everything they need from an articulated concept all the way through to an end product. It's about being ready to take the next step. It's about being ready to push yourself into a place that's a little bit more risky. So rather than kind of giving you a TED talk, I figured that I would take a risk of my own. This is the first time I have sung on a stage in a full show of any kind for probably over 25 years. So I've decided to rely on my most favourite musical genre, which is musical theatre, to help me explain to you a little bit more who I am, why this is happening, and what it's all going to look like. I had the incredible privilege of growing up on the northern beaches of Sydney, and that exposed me to a childhood crucible of creativity. My primary school years, there was a primary school teacher at my school by the name of John Spade. And John Spade is no longer with us, but he was one of the early progenitors of the Manly Jazz Festival that still continues to this day. And he was my choir master. And it opened me up to incredible experiences because he was not only a primary school teacher but an artist in the community. He had actually one of his ex-students come to him who was working at EMI Studios and said, "We've got this thing called the Christian Children's Fund. They're running an advertising campaign. Yoko Ono, for the very first time since John Lennon's death, has given royalty rights to us to record So This Is Christmas, and we need a choir." So here was I in, I think it was third grade, trotted down to EMI Studios, and just, not by casting, but by chance, they had shown us a film of the Ethiopian famine, and they were interviewing us, and we were singing, "A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year," but then they kind of interviewed us as well, and very, very much by chance, they decided that my footage was what they wanted, and I became the face of the Christian Children's Fund. And people would say, "You're the candle girl." That was me. It's those kind of experiences in childhood that meant that when my dad retired from the army and when I was 10, and we moved to the south coast of New South Wales, I kept finding my way into things that got me back to Sydney and did some great things. I was twice in professional development programs with Opera Australia. We performed at the old Sydney Cricket Ground when they used to do the NRL finals there with Yoki Yindi in the background. I had incredible opportunities. But unfortunately, not long after I started studying at university to pursue this career more fully, a series of unexpected events irrevocably altered the course of my life and set my ship adrift, effectively. I actually started here in Canberra at ANU in a theatre studies degree, but I came up against a series of traumatic events. In the 90s, we didn't really talk about trauma at all. And what ended up happening while I was in the middle of rehearsing for a production of Lysistrata that I was in the company of, was I found myself bundled into my parents' car with everything that I possessed and being taken home to be looked after with what we now know as a misdiagnosis of bipolar disorder. But it didn't stop me initially. I got myself together and found my way into a creative arts degree at the University of Wollongong as a voice major. And I actually can remember being in a master class, which was part of our assessment process, and I had sung this German lieder. For the life of me, I actually can't remember what the piece was. I can't remember the composer. I can tell you very loosely translated, it was something about, "Oh, how I love spring," and the smell of the grass and the flowers coming up as very romantic era. And the students and the lecturers would give feedback, and one of my lecturers said, "I don't feel like you're connecting with this work." And he was dead right. I was on such heavy medication for a diagnosis, it turns out I didn't even actually have, that while my voice could do all of this beautiful stuff, I had no emotive connection to it whatsoever. And it began a very slow but gradual stepping away. I turned to the medical professionals that were supposed to help me understand this, and discovered even back then that there was this very interesting conflicting narrative that was happening. On the one hand, when I'd originally been diagnosed, I was told, you know, bipolar disorder isn't the death sentence or the life sentence that, you know, it used to be. You take your medication and you do all the right things and you can have the same life as anybody else. But on the other hand, I was told, oh, you want to be a classical singer and you want to sing in Covent Garden and you want to, you know, travel to Broadway and you want to do all these things, you can't. Because crossing timelines will make you manic. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I'd already stepped away from the creative arts degree at that stage and sidestepped into an English lit degree. And the response was, congratulations, you're pregnant. No, you need to defer uni. Because you can't be pregnant and actually study, because the stress will mean that you actually, you will end up sick. So, you know, if you want a healthy baby, you need to leave a university degree. So I wanted a healthy baby. So I stepped back. And I raised 3 beautiful kids, and my marriage, and I tried to hold it together. But what started to emerge was what became a 25-year relationship with the mental health system. And there are so many more stories attached to that, including the time that I had ECT. And I didn't just lose my short-term memory, I lost all of it. And in fact, the nurses and the doctors, the psychiatrists are going, we don't actually know what the hell happened here. And that took me 6 months to climb out of and start regaining some of what I had. But fast forward to 2020, we're in this lockdown. We're all here watching the world through our screens. I had just moved to Bathurst. I had been caught in the Black Summer fires on the south coast where I'd lived. And I moved to Bathurst for a new start. And I knew no one in the town except for my daughter Leah, who was studying a theatre media degree at CSU at the time. And I knew I needed to get out and I needed to connect with the community. So I went, well, what can I do? I know theatre. So I started auditioning. And then we hit a lockdown. So I just started sending video auditions. And I was cast in Romeo and Juliet. I was actually approached to produce a mental health storytelling event. But the one thing that I finally had the time and space and kick in the butt to do was to start putting pen to paper on a musical theatre script that I'd actually had the idea for like 10 years prior. And I am going to invite up onto the stage Bianca Judd, Mel Grilevsky. Can you say your name, please? Grislevsky, and Robin Davidson from Rebus Theatre. And they're actually going to take you to a little rehearsal read of the second half of the final scene in Act 1.
What do you mean this isn't real?
It's an amalgamation of flashbacks.
I know that! The ED nurse that said I was going to die by suicide anyway, so her job was just to patch me up and wait for me to succeed. The staff that threatened to strip search me unless I stripped in front of them to prove that I wasn't hiding anything in my body so that I could self-harm.
But it's a flashback fee. That means,
It's not real.
yes, it's over. You're safe.
You're kidding.
What's this?
Packed by Jodie Pico.
What's it doing here?
I don't know. This is just a flashback. Okay, if it's just a flashback, it's come from somewhere in my past, right? Any clues?
It's a flashback fee. So, where did these things happen?
The hospital. reading this book, talking to Max about it, he was my favourite nurse. I'm never going to achieve anything. Everywhere I look, there's a trigger. Even this book, I can't even make it through this book.
Discomfort is not there to tell us we've gone too far. It's there to push us a little harder. Think about how we build muscle. If you lift weights, doesn't it hurt after the workout is over?
Well, yes.
And does that mean you shouldn't pick up the weights the next time?
No, because to build muscle, you need to damage it a little first. The body repairs itself and builds more muscle.
So if instead of putting the book down, what if you kept reading?
Some of this is pretty graphic. I don't think I should be feeding my brain with that.
It's a story in a book, Fee.
What if I come away with more ideas about how to harm myself?
What if you come away with more reasons not to?
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
What was that?
Something my mum said.
You're the one steering the ship.
That's something my dad said.
You're the only one who can guide yourself into the harbour. None of us doubt your determination to become a psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist with an arm full of scars that say, I'm an objective professional.
Don't underestimate the power of your experience. That empathy is a superpower that can transform lives. Read the book, Fee. If it becomes too much, put it down. Then pick it up again. The weights do nothing, sitting on the rack, just looking pretty.
So, I'm pretty sure you've worked out I didn't become a psychiatrist. That's because I found something else, and it's called peer work. Peer workers are people that not only have lived experience of mental health distress, they are people whose lives have been so significantly altered by coming into engagement with the mental health system that their identity shifts. And that was me. I now work with Lived Experience Australia, and there is a bunch of organisations like this that advise the federal government on much needed mental health reform, legislative and policy change. And I do that not only drawing on my own lived experience, but working with consumers, so people that have used the mental health system or engaged with the mental health system, and carers. And we listen to what the needs actually are, and we use that lived experience lens to advise federal government on what needs to change, how we increase that access, how we make lives better for people that need the mental health system when they are in distress. But the nuance and the heart of a peer worker is not actually in being part of a clinical system. Peer workers understand that that altered identity, or what is called a patient identity, arises because of the power structures that are in play. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare last year gave us statistics that indicate that nearly half of the Australian population will experience a mental health diagnosis in their lifetime. And when you think about the fact that just one loved one, by extension, becomes a carer, we've actually now got a problem that affects every single Australian. And so we've got to start asking, the hell? What happened? How do we suddenly all get mentally ill? Like, yes, there's been COVID, and yes, there's been bushfires, and yes, there's been climate change. But we also need to be looking at The fact that we've created a culture where if you have a problem and you are distressed for any life circumstance, you go to a psychiatrist, you go to a psychologist, you go to a medical professional. And we're never going to have enough psychiatrists and psychologists and clinicians to deal with this problem. Peer workers understand and work with people in the community to say, you get to steer the ship. This is your life. This is what you want. And I actually had this training before I ever got to lockdown, but I couldn't make it work in my own life, so I didn't actually work in the field. In fact, I spent so long in mental health hospital admissions that I have a completely maxed out HEX degree and I don't have a single degree to show for it. I do have a certificate for in mental health, I do have a diploma in counselling, and I do have a diploma in arts. But I would end up in hospital after census date. I couldn't recoup my costs. But I have studied so many different fields. And when we look at the fact that these experiences are not rare, they're not one person in the community, they are quite extensive. We need to stop saying, this is what's wrong with you, and say, what do you need? What do you want? Who are you and what is meaningful to your life? When we think about complex trauma, when we think about it through a trauma frame instead of a biomedical frame, we're looking at people that have learned through multiple adverse childhood experiences to become chameleons. So you then bring that person into the mental health system and say, this is who you are. Yep, okay, I have bipolar disorder. In fact, I don't have either of those two. I've given you 2 diagnoses through this show. I don't have either of them. And in fact, my psychiatric diagnosis is only helpful in terms of helping me work through what I need. When we realise that we're effectively, increasingly with youth mental health, coming to these systems as children and asking giants, experts, who we are, we've got a problem. Lexi Seculis is here in the room. I've really recently been doing directing training with Lexi, and Lexi has a million wonderful sayings. One of them is, theatre is life, with the boring bits cut out. And that's effectively what you're getting on stage here today. However, we also forget, when I'm looking at you and I'm hearing your story, that lens narrows even further. We can't ever know the entirety of someone's experience. You particularly can't know the entirety of someone's experience if their complex trauma background means that they've got amnesia about the trauma that they've had. You can only articulate what you know about yourself, and you won't actually be able to access those states until you find environments that are safe enough to allow you to explore them. What I will do is just talk very briefly about the time that I spent in the mental health units. It's a time that I actually used to refer to as wasted years. But it's very interesting because I actually ended up with a 15-year journey of chronic suicide attempts and thoughts. And there were times where I would only have 2 to 3 weeks between admissions. And for the majority, like, the ECT was a bit of a different animal, and there were a few occasions of what we now understand to be dissociative fugue states, and not psychosis. But the majority of the time I was actually washing out on prescription overdoses that I've had. Don't go there. They're a waste of time. It just screws up your brain chemistry. You're not actually going to be effective, even if you think that you could be. But in those spaces, I actually had a fair amount of clarity because I wasn't heavily medicated. And it used to fascinate me as we stood around, or sat around actually, doing colouring in on printed mandalas, because that's the only thing you can do in a mental health unit. God forbid that you bring in a crocheting hook or an embroidery hoop, because you might be violent with it. But that's all you could do. But the thing that was interesting about that was the incredible conversations that would happen, that interconnected sense of shared journey. The other thing that I found fascinating in that space was sitting with people that had very deep experiences of psychosis, and the creative ways they were trying to communicate. We're told that this is a problem, and in fact, the extreme emotional states that lead to our brains needing to leave our bodies, that's the problem. But while people are there off in this safer space, at least in their altered reality, they're incredibly creative in the way that they try and communicate with you. And it left me thinking, hell yeah, am I surrounded by artists? What's going on here? These days when I work with Lived Experience Australia, and I do a 2-day forum event, or I'm at a conference or a symposium or something, and afterwards, and we're all just kind of having a drink or a coffee, or we're just kind of sitting in the lounge just going, my brain is full. When we're kind of just talking and being humans, the thing that fascinates me is all of my lived experience advocate colleagues, almost all of them are artists. So you've got to ask, the hell is going on there? Back to 2020. I started writing, I started producing, I started acting. There were some experiences that got in the way of a continued deliberate move towards the stage. And I prefer to be behind the keyboard or to be backstage because it just felt safer. But I started getting myself into environments where I could test my limits. And because I'd had those early experiences, and I'd been bloody lucky with those early experiences, I kind of knew where I wanted to go. And it was a halting, stumbling kind of journey. But I found my way into the song company for a 4-day community singing development program, and from that I had an incredible music teacher who's a principal artist with the song company work with me, who also has family members that are deaf, and that's really important to me because I'm deaf. So I don't actually receive audio waves. Everything, even when I'm speaking, when I'm singing, it all resonates here, which actually sometimes makes it tricky for ensemble work. But my voice had so radically changed that when I started lessons with Amy, she'd be there going, nah, that's not your sound. Nope, that's not your sound. That's not your sound either. And I had to learn different ways to receive the feedback that I needed. If you had heard me sing 3 years ago, it was a different sound. I actually tested some of this material with my daughter and she burst into tears and went, I haven't heard your voice since I was a kid. And it's because of the layers that I had to keep putting on because that's the sound that I thought people wanted. But that obviously had a psychological component to it as well, and I was very grateful for the support of Amy. I'm very grateful for the ongoing support of Anthony Pitts, who unfortunately isn't been able to be here with us today, but is giving me the chance to learn the compositional skills that I didn't get to complete at university. I am super grateful for the man up the back there, Robin Davidson and Rebus Theatre Company, and the incredible people that I've gotten to know when I've been doing Systems of Sanity. I'm actually the scriptwriter and production manager for Just Hearing as well, which is Fazan is here as well somewhere. It's a partnership between Canberra Community Law and Rebus Theatre, where we use forum theatre scripts that I wrote to help solicitors understand how to work with clients in the community that have lived experience of mental health challenges. I effectively, in the last 3 years, in rediscovering this inner artist, I feel like I graduated from a theatre degree and almost a music degree. That is the power of finding the right people, but that's not an easy journey as well. This is where I've landed. Like, yes, I can continue to pursue a career as what I refer to as a re-emerging artist. But I'm not the only re-emerging artist out there. And part of my journey has taught me that you have to start taking risks to understand that maybe you can be an artist. Many people don't identify as an artist. We do all of this art for recovery's sake. Everybody's really into that now. There's slam poetry nights or mental health art exhibitions where the artist isn't paid for what they're being exhibited. It's actually there to promote that we're all, destigmatising mental health. So people are creating these intuitive bodies of work, much like I was doing in lockdown. But you don't actually see the rubber hit the road until you start testing the material. Now we talk about transformative arts-based practice. Here's where the rubber hits the road for me, and this is why I'm so passionate about this idea. I had a journey of 15 years of chronic suicidal attempts and thoughts. I was trained as a peer worker. I had this counselling degree. I wasn't doing anything with it because I couldn't see it actually benefit me in any way until I started engaging that inner artist, that inner artistic muscle. And as I started to see things come out of my head and embody in my daily experience, and I found who I was, those thoughts slowly began over 2 years, actually over more like 4 years, to dissipate. I now know from the work that I've done, I know the root cause of that, and I know that that's dealt with. And I know that sounds big and grand for people that have had these long journeys, but I do honestly believe it's possible. So my company is not necessarily there to, cure you of your mental health challenges. Please notice that I'm not using the word mental illness, because when I'm talking from a trauma frame, the word mental illness really doesn't apply. However, you can identify however you want. Your journey is your journey. But the idea of it takes a company is, say for example, this script that you saw workshopped on this stage today. Here's Fee in the community, this person that kind of wants to test this thing, and they don't know what to do, but they find out about It Takes a Company, and they come to It Takes a Company. Say, hi, I've kind of got this thing, and I'd really love to see it workshopped. Great. So It Takes a Company says, no worries. We will look at putting you through an artistic and professional development program, which is a 3-phase program. First of all, you will have access to an online portal where you learn basically one-on-one creative industries. You need to understand your business, how a business structure works. You need to understand how to write a grant application, access writers. I work with the disability arts community now too, and that was the most incredible thing to learn, that I could have an access writer. And we take people through what is actually a hybrid model, because to progress from module to module, you actually have to book in with coaches and people that have got experience at grant assessing. And it's completely self-paced. If it takes you 12 months to do it because life is too confronting, that's fine. You also have access to these coaches. You have access to the support you need as you're taking these big steps, or what feel like big steps. Now, say Fee has gone through that phase of the program and comes back to It Takes a Company and goes, guess what, I've got a $5,000 arts activity grant from Arts ACT. Great. You get to keep that. We're not touching that, but we are actually going to pair you with an artist in the community, possibly, hopefully people that have had their own lived experience and know not only what it is to do concept development, but the emotional challenges that come for any artist. Like, yes, there will be all of the stuff that comes from, can I really do this? But actually every artist has that journey. Every emerging artist has that journey. So we're going to pair people with a concept development worker. And then the coaches that have taken Fee through this online model are also on hand as well. So Fee actually also has fluctuating mobility and chronic fatigue, because they now also have osteoarthritis riddling their body and a bunch of other things that are actually linked to complex trauma. But say, for example, Fee and this artist in the community are working on this workshop, and they've chosen a venue that doesn't actually have ramp access and their body just goes to shit. They can tap the coach on the shoulder and go, hey, I can't show up because the stairs and the bathroom, it's too much. Okay, fine. That's the coach's job to find an accessible venue. How do we make sure that your access needs are being met? And also, how do we check in with you just to check on your well-being? And then, say, for example, Fee workshops this thing and goes, you know what, this is ready for, just a tiny little preview somewhere. It Takes a Company will have partnerships within the community with any range of places. Maybe it's the Street Theatre, maybe it's CMAG, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's Mill Theatre. What will happen is that those artists will be taken through a process of matching them up with the right place that will help them find an audience. And those artists will retain a cut of the ticket sales, or say, for example, it's an art exhibition and we've been given an exhibition space. they can auction their art. They will give them all of the promotional and marketing support that they need to get an audience in to auction their art. The idea is that this is not about launching you to, be the next star of Sydney Theatre Company. The idea of this is to take you through and help you understand that the art that you're doing in your spare time, because it's good for your recovery, actually has value, actually has power. I talk about your disability or your lived experience or your experience of marginalisation. That's great. You don't have to. You could do a photo exhibition of feet, if that's what you want. The idea is not that we're creating storytelling opportunities, although they are valid. The idea is that we're giving people the opportunity to explore a different identity. So as these cupcakes are being handed around, I want to explain to you why the hell you're all getting a cupcake. For me, the 26th of January has a very different meaning to what it has for many Australians, and I know that that is a loaded date for a lot of people. For me, when I escaped the Black Summer fires and I moved to Bathurst, I went back to Sydney at the end of January, and I spent 10 days in what was my childhood playground. And I ended up very last minute with a last minute ticket to the Australia Day live concert. And when I stood there and I watched John Foreman conducting the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and I listened to Daniel Bell from the Ten Tenors singing Nessun Dorma, which is this beautiful aria where the prince is saying, the Princess Turandot has fallen into a deep death-like sleep. And that song is all about him saying, "None shall sleep until I have rescued my sleeping princess." I instantly went back to being a 17-year-old on the grass at Opera in the Domain with my Opera Australia Summer Workshop cohort, listening to Miriam Gormley, listening to David Hobson and going, that's who I want to be. Now, the boat has effectively sailed for that journey. If I wanted to be an Opera Australia performer, I would need to have the amount of time that I had. I would need to also become a psychiatrist, and I'd be ready to start when I'm ready to retire. So that's not my journey anymore, and I know that. But that moment kicked off for me this desire to go, I am done living the life that I have been living. I don't want the life that I have, but I'm done living like this. And so it kind of has become this anniversary of a rebirth. What has been distributed for you is a symbol of how you can support the rebirth of other artists. To get this company started, we need to raise at least $20,000 to develop the online model, to fund the first cohort of 5 Canberra-based artists here. So I invite you, if you are interested, to consider donating. But I'm also looking for partners in the community, people that can actually help make this happen here in Canberra. This model is actually being developed so that it has national scalability, but we want to keep it close to home first so that we can test this out and make sure that it would do the right thing by the people that are putting our faith in us. And finally, I'm looking for artists that would want to be part of this mentoring, that would want to be part of working with people to bring these dreams to life. But to foster the next, an inspiring cohort of re-emerging artists, it really does take a company.